Hey gamers, Maniac here with GameAccess.net. And with the release of Final Fantasy X 10-2 HD Remaster, we are coming to the end of a very big development, or I should say very big release cycle for this season. And I have to say, this is, while not as big as the release season for last year, everything seemed to be focusing on RPGs. With the exception of Titanfall, which came out earlier this week, it just seemed like everything that was coming out all seemed to be RPGs either coming from Obsidian or Square Enix. And I wanted to talk about this because I haven't seen an RPG release schedule like this in probably 14 years. And to be perfectly honest, I think that there are a lot of people out there that probably haven't seen a schedule like this since the day of the Super Nintendo. It's great. It's great to see that this genre that had been, in a bit of a lull in the past couple of years, with not too many great games coming out in the genre on a regular basis, saw some great hits and have been enjoyable for me to check out, certainly. And I wanted to give a little bit of a focus on it, at least for this briefly. First off, I wanted to talk about one of the first games that came out this year. This was released by Nintendo, but it was developed by Square Enix. Bravely Default for the Nintendo 3DS. This was published by Nintendo, as I said before. I got my hands on this. This was one of the last collector's edition that I got. These things right now, I think I paid about $55 for it. Right now, these are going for 150 bucks. I am shocked, but I think the reason why is because this game is really good. I think Nintendo did a really good job promoting the game, and Square Enix had a great idea in place. For anybody interested in checking out the game, it harkens back to some of the earlier Final Fantasy games, like Final Fantasy VI, or I think maybe Final Fantasy IV, which basically the games focus on job system, where you pick jobs for your playable characters, and that would in turn give you certain spells and certain abilities depending upon how you leveled up those jobs, and obviously would change your character's appearances. When Nintendo released a demo for this back in January, it gave a bit of a tease for what this kind of job system would play like, and the story and the gameplay mechanics and things like this. And on top of that, they had a demo that was released for free as a prequel to the story of Bravely Default. The demo, if you haven't played it and have played Bravely Default, the level does not take place. It does not take place during the Bravely Default game. It actually is a prequel story. Some of the cool things is that depending upon the bosses that you battle before upgrading to the full version of the game, or some of the side missions that you completed, you can actually unlock special items and things like this, as well as carry over up to 20 characters that you picked up through Street Pass. So that's great. That's really great. I'm really looking forward to playing the full version of the game. It took me a little bit to get into the right mindset for the demo, but once I figured out, with a little bit of help on how the job system worked, I played through that thing until I beat it. I couldn't stop myself from beating it. I was really happy about that. I've heard recently, you can't really find these in stores anymore, and obviously collector's editions are completely sold out. They're not making any more of them, at least not in this country. I don't know if there's a Japanese version or something like that of this. But from what I've been told, the game is already up to this point sold over 200,000 copies. Awesome, great. For a handheld, that's incredible. And here's the cool thing. As far as I know, that number does not include digital sales. Nintendo is selling this game, the full retail game, through the Nintendo eShop digitally. I don't know if those numbers have been released, so those numbers would be on top of the retail sales as well. But here's the kicker. There's already a sequel for this game that's out in Japan, actually. I believe it's called Bravely Default the Second, or the Second Game, or something like that. I can't remember how it's translated out. But here's the kicker. Square Enix did promise that there could be a sequel release for this game, or they could port over the sequel to the English language and release the game here if the first game sold well. Well, by my book, if the game is sold out in all the retail stores here, and I have been told by many people online, it is quite hard to come by retail. They'll probably have to do a reprinting or a remanufacturing of it and put it back on the store shelves. That's a good sign, I think. That really is, and a lot of people are basically buying it online because they can't get it at retail. That's got to be a good sign, I think. Or at the very least, a really good sign that the sequel may come out. So kudos to Square Enix for releasing it here. Kudos to everybody for interesting it. Reviews for the game were very high. Really excited about getting to play it. Loved the demo. They did a great job. The commercials were good. So there you have it. Square Enix released the sequel. The next game I want to talk about here in this season of RPGs is the second game that came out. I believe it came out last month. Lightning Returns Final Fantasy 13. Now, the misstep about this is that what I'm holding here is the Final Fantasy 13 Collector's Edition. Square Enix only released this through their online store. You couldn't get these at retail at all. Which is kind of sad because this Collector's Edition is actually pretty awesome. It even comes with a pocket watch. And everybody knows that ladies love a guy with a pocket watch. At least that's according to what Sheldon Cooper said, and of course I believe him. I wasn't really interested in picking up this game. I have played a bit of Final Fantasy 13. I have not started playing Final Fantasy 13-2 yet, although I do have a copy. I haven't started playing it yet because I haven't beaten 13 yet. I picked this game's demo up. I was just interested in playing the demo. I loved the demo, and I thought the gameplay mechanics were fantastic in it. The demo alone was why I picked up this game, and why I was interested in the Collector's Edition. Plus, this thing comes with, it comes with some exclusive DLC, although I think you can get it now. I think you might be able to get the DLC now for the, through your various online marketplace. Also comes through a full art book and a pocket watch. And ladies love that. So I had to get this just for the pocket watch itself. When you're dealing with time mechanics, include a pocket watch. That's pretty awesome, actually. So the other thing was, and the other incentive was, and we're doing this, they did do a pre-order incentive for anybody who picked this game up at participating retailers for the Cloud Buster sword and Cloud Strife uniform for Lightning in this game. I thought that might have been exclusive. It's not exclusive. They are selling it now on the online marketplace, which is cool. You know, they want to make sales on it. You don't have to pay extra if you already got it downloaded, obviously. But this was really cool. From what I've been told, the Lightning Returns reviews actually were kind of mixed. It seemed like, I mean, I love the gameplay mechanics, and for me, gameplay was very important, and obviously if the demo was a taste of those gameplay mechanics, you know, I was sold out on that immediately. From what I've been told, reviewers weren't really too hot on the gameplay story. Coming from the fact of there are current reviews in place, especially by the Spooning one and stuff like that, who did not like Final Fantasy 13 story, and there are other reviewers like Mars Girl and stuff like that who didn't really like the Final Fantasy 13 mechanics. I think that expectations for this game were kind of low, given the releases of Final Fantasy 13 and Final Fantasy 13-2. But the demo for me, you know, put those fears aside, I was interested in picking it up. I'm really excited about it. Obviously, this will probably be the final game in the Final Fantasy 13 universe. At least it'll probably be the last one that they're going to release on the current-gen consoles. And right now, it looks like development is going specifically to Final Fantasy 14 and Final Fantasy 15. So, it was nice Final Fantasy 13 universe while we were lasting. You know, it's time probably for Square to move on. But they at least wrapped up the story. I thought that was kind of cool. So, at the same time, Square was hyping up Final Fantasy 13, Lightning Returns Final Fantasy 13, or Final Fantasy 13-3. Square was also prepping the long-awaited re-release of Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy X-2 on the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita. I have noticed in the last year, or certainly in the last 2 years, that a lot of developers for these classic cult games are reporting and re-releasing them on the new consoles and the current consoles. It started probably with Ico and Shadow of the Colossus back in when they were originally released back in, I think it was 2012 or so, maybe 2011. Great game, great remaster, awesome. Actually, now that I think about it, I actually might have started back with God of War's 1 and 2 getting re-released on the PS3, but that's neither here nor there. Whatever came first, it might have been God of War actually, but the thing is that these games are selling well because people want to play these older games. In a lot of cases, they don't have the old hardware anymore. For me, if you ask me, I don't mind. You want to reprint a popular game, you could just go and restamp the ISOs. I'd be more than happy to pick that up. My PS3 can play PS1 games, for God's sake, so I don't have a problem with that. And there is some talk from what I've been told, particularly I think GameStop was reporting out a rumor that the PS4 might actually get a PS1 and PS2 emulator in there that could play games off disc. Don't know about that for sure, and it probably will use the PlayStation Now system for PS3 games, but it's something. And I certainly would not have a problem if Square Enix decided to reprint Final Fantasy VII. Please, please do that. This week, Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy X-2 finally came out. And again, just like with Lightning Returns, Square only released it through their online store. For anybody who might have been following me on Twitter might realize, yeah, I had some problems getting this one. I was posting some listen to my stories about this. I think I'm done with Square Enix's online site, maybe for a couple of baubles here or there. But I almost thought there was no way. I thought that for sure FedEx was going to have lost this. It turned out that they were about I got a delivery confirmation on this one, and I hadn't actually gotten the package delivered. In fact, I didn't get the package on my doorstep until 24 hours after it was marked delivered. If anybody actually has had a similar story with that, post a comment about it, I don't know. They also accidentally sent out a mass email saying that these were going to be back ordered and everything else, which did not happen. But just saying, you know, a bit of an issue with getting this thing at line. For those of you who might have picked it up at retail, you obviously couldn't have gotten this, but they did actually have a decent limited edition with an art book. And the Vita version actually also included, I think, some art cards and things like that, although I think it was basically Final Fantasy X on Vita game cart, and Final Fantasy X-2 would have to be downloaded onto your Vita's internal memory or your memory card or something like that. So that was kind of cool. Obviously, this game, or the original game, Final Fantasy X, is probably considered to be one of the best role-playing games on the PS2, if not one of the best role-playing games of all time. Now, Noah Antweiler probably disagrees with that tremendously. He is... The first lines, listen to my story, as he responded, no, fuck you! Not listening to your story. But even he couldn't complain about Final Fantasy X's gameplay mechanics, and even though he complained about Final Fantasy X too, he thought that Final Fantasy X-2's costume dress sphere system and things like that, at least, you know, even he had to say, well, they were trying something new. It didn't work as well as it could have, but, you know, I gotta give them props for trying. In my case, I've never played these games. All of my friends who had PS2s back in the day have. I have heard stories about this game that really gets sentimental with me. And on top of that, and I'm really excited, this game not only comes with 10, 10.2 remastered, but versions of 10 and 10.2 that were only released in Japan. With, I think there are extra missions. They redid the graphics. It is in widescreen, obviously. It is in high definition as opposed to progressive scan or standard definition for the original PS2 version, so there will probably be less jaggies on the models. Also, this game comes with an art book, collectible cards, and a very rare Blu-ray soundtrack, which I think alone costs $60 on, because it has to be imported from Japan. That Blu-ray soundtrack is only available on Square Enix's store. It does include MP3s on the Blu-ray as well, though. So if you have a Blu-ray player or you just want to copy the MP3s, you can do that. That disc alone is what made this an $80 collector's edition. If you ask me, that disc alone is worth $60. Totally worth it. Totally worth the purchase. I have no idea if this is still available on Square Store. If you liked Final Fantasy X or Final Fantasy X-2 at all, you owe it to yourself to try to look this thing up. It's a great collector's edition from the looks of it. And obviously, Vita also has, I believe, collectible cards. If you got the Vita version, I think it's going to have collectible cards through pre-order or something like that. But here's the cool thing also. It also includes some other stuff that was only released in Japan, including like a radio drama. I don't know what it is about radio dramas, but Japan seems to have a lot of radio dramas going on. Particularly with things like Metal Gear Solid had a radio drama. No More Heroes had a radio drama. For anybody who might be from Japan watching this video, are radio dramas, you know, things that they normally do over there? Is it a regular thing? Does Konami own the airwaves over there? Because if they do, I'd love to hear about what's going on over there, because that sounds really interesting. Here in the United States, we don't do audio dramas. I heard we used to way back in the day before television. But we don't do that sort of thing here for the most part. All they do is just play the same song in the same commercials over and over again in my end of the woods. So it kind of stinks, but there you have it. The last game, which I don't have here right now, that I would like to talk about, is not a Square game, but also the last game was South Park: The Stick of Truth. Actually, kind of a, even though it seemed more like a parody of RPGs, parodies work. I always believed the first RPG I ever played, front to back, end to end, was an RPG that could be considered a parody. It was Anachronox on the PC, and I know I've talked about this on one of my RPG Memories video. But I kind of wanted to say that every cliche from RPGs were in there and done properly on Anachronox. And, you know, once again, South Park is parodying it, and it just seemed like, I always believed that parody could be quite the truest form of, or the purest form of what it is that they're actually parodying, because they have to be relevant. And if you don't believe me, anybody seen Young Frankenstein, for example? Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein, written by Gene Wilder, starring Gene Wilder, and the guy from Everybody Loves Raymond, whose name escapes me off the top. Mark, I can't remember his name. But rest in peace, good sir, certainly. But, yeah, Cloris Leachman and Terry Garr and everybody. What was so great about that was that they really replicated the lighting and the set dressing and everything else. And so, you know, here was South Park RPG, and Princess Angel probably would say she likes it. You know, she really liked it. She's been playing it non-stop. I don't know what she's going to think when we get to the anal probe sequence, but she's not. She's more of a fighting game fan, but she likes that game quite a bit actually, and she doesn't want to stop playing it. So take for that what you will. Maybe if I can, this right here I've also got my hands on. This is the box version of The Sky. This is a reprinted version done by Dark Horse from Yogesh. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his name. Mr. Amano, and all of his art. I may want to do a review of this pretty soon, but I just picked this up. It is beautiful, and expect a review of that down the road. Until next time, guys, this is Maniac with GameAccess.net. Take care. Over and out.